The billionaire threw the floral arrangement across the mahogany table, and Julia Carter barely flinched as orchids scattered across her carefully organized wedding binder. "This is completely unacceptable," Jason Anderson said, his jaw tight as he glared at the delicate flowers like they had personally offended him. "I specifically said nothing pretentious. These look like they belong at a funeral for someone who thought they were important." Julia took a slow breath, counting to 3 in her mind while maintaining her professional smile. She had been a wedding planner for 6 years, and she had dealt with demanding clients before, but Jason Anderson was in a category all his own. The man was impossible. Every decision required 3 meetings. Every choice was wrong until he decided it was right. Every vendor she brought in was either too expensive or not good enough, despite the fact that his budget was essentially unlimited. "The orchids were actually your fiancé's choice," Julia said calmly, making a note on her tablet. "But I can certainly show you other options. Perhaps something with roses and peonies." Jason ran a hand through his dark hair, loosening his tie with the other. They were in his downtown office, 50 stories above the city, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased his empire. Anderson Enterprises had made him a billionaire by 35, specializing in sustainable energy solutions that had revolutionized the industry. He was brilliant, driven, and absolutely exhausting to work with. "Where is Melissa anyway?" he asked, checking his watch. "She was supposed to be here an hour ago." Julia glanced at her phone. She had been wondering the same thing. Melissa Hartford, Jason's bride-to-be, had been increasingly absent from their wedding planning sessions over the past month. At first, she had been enthusiastic, but lately, Julia found herself meeting with Jason alone more often than not. "I sent her a reminder this morning," Julia said. "But I can walk you through the options myself if you would like to stay on schedule." Jason sat down heavily in his leather chair, looking suddenly tired. For a moment, Julia saw past the demanding exterior to something else. Stress, maybe, or doubt. But then his phone rang and the moment passed. "Anderson," he answered sharply. He listened for a moment, his expression darkening. "Fine. Tell them I will be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and stood. "We need to reschedule. Emergency with the Singapore project." Julia gathered her materials, trying not to feel frustrated. This was the 3rd meeting this week that had been cut short. The wedding was in 6 weeks, and they were behind on nearly everything. The venue was booked, at least. The Metropolitan Gardens had been her suggestion, and both Jason and Melissa had actually agreed on it immediately, which had felt like a small miracle at the time. "Mr. Anderson," Julia said as she packed her bag, "I really need to finalize the florals, the seating chart, and the menu by the end of next week. We are running out of time." "I am aware of the timeline, Miss Carter," he said, already pulling on his suit jacket. "I will have Melissa call you tomorrow to confirm her preferences." But Melissa did not call the next day, or the day after that. Julia finally reached her on Thursday afternoon, catching her between whatever social obligations kept her so busy. "Oh, Julia, I am so sorry," Melissa said, her voice airy and distracted. "Things have just been crazy lately. Can you just choose whatever you think is best? Jason trusts your judgment." Julia doubted that very much. Jason Anderson did not seem to trust anyone's judgment except his own. "Melissa, this is your wedding," Julia said gently. "I want to make sure it reflects what you and Jason want." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Right, of course. Look, just send me some options by email and I will look at them when I get a chance." The call ended and Julia stared at her phone, a knot forming in her stomach. She had seen this before. The distant bride, the groom picking up the slack, the mounting tension. It never ended well. She sent the email anyway, with 3 carefully curated options for flowers, complete with photos and pricing. Then she called Jason's assistant to schedule another meeting. To her surprise, Jason himself called her back within an hour. "My office tomorrow at 8, he said without preamble. "And bring coffee. The good kind, not whatever corporate swill they serve in the building." Julia showed up the next morning with 2 lattes from the artisan coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment. It had taken an extra 40 minutes to make the detour, but she was determined to show Jason Anderson that she could meet his exacting standards. He looked surprised when she handed him the cup, reading the label on the side. "Rosewood Cafe," he said. "How did you know?" "Know what?" "This is where I used to get coffee every morning before I moved to the penthouse downtown. I have not had their espresso in 2 years. Julia felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at having accidentally done something right. "Lucky guess," she said. For the first time since they had started working together, Jason smiled. It transformed his entire face, softening the harsh lines and making him look younger, more approachable. Julia felt her heart do something strange in her chest, and she quickly looked down at her tablet. They worked through the morning, and for once, Jason was focused and decisive. He chose the roses and peonies, approved the seating chart with only minor adjustments, and selected a menu that balanced elegant and approachable. Julia found herself enjoying the process, watching the way his mind worked through problems with the same intensity he probably applied to his business deals. "You are good at this," he said suddenly, looking up from the sample invitations she had brought. "At what?" "At handling me." "I know I am not easy to work with." Julia considered her response carefully. "You know what you want. That actually makes my job easier in some ways." Melissa would disagree. "She says I am impossible." There was something in his voice that made Julia pause. She knew she should not cross the line from professional to personal, but the words came out anyway. "Are you happy, Mr. Anderson?" He looked at her sharply, and for a long moment she thought he would shut down the conversation entirely. But then he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "That is a complicated question. Most important ones are." Jason studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Julia felt exposed under that gaze, suddenly aware of how early she had woken up to get his coffee, how she had worn her navy dress because it was professional but also her most flattering. "Call me Jason," he said finally. "If we are going to be asking complicated questions, we should at least be on a first-name basis." "Okay, Jason, you can call me Julia." His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it and frowned. "Melissa, I need to take this." Julia gathered her things to give him privacy, but he gestured for her to stay. She tried not to listen, but it was impossible in the quiet office. "No, Melissa, I cannot just move the wedding date back. We have vendors, guests coming from overseas." He paused, listening. "That is not what I am saying. I am saying we need to commit to this, to us." Another pause. "Fine, we will talk about it tonight." When he hung up, his expression was carefully blank. Julia knew that look. It was the same one her father had worn when her mother told him she was leaving. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "We should get back to work," Jason said, his voice remote again. "Show me those invitation options." Over the next 3 weeks, Julia saw Jason more than she saw anyone else in her life. They met daily, sometimes twice a day, working through every detail of the wedding. Melissa appeared occasionally, staying for 20 minutes before claiming she had somewhere else to be. Julia watched Jason's jaw tighten each time his fiancée walked out, but he never said anything. He just threw himself harder into the planning. Julia found herself thinking about him at odd hours. The way he drummed his fingers on the desk when he was concentrating. How he always brought her coffee now, having learned that she took hers with oat milk and honey. The rare moments when he laughed, usually at something self-deprecating, and the whole room seemed to brighten. She was falling for him. She realized with horror one night while lying in bed. Falling for a man who was getting married in less than 3 weeks. A client. A billionaire who lived in a world completely separate from hers. She resolved to be more professional, to keep their meetings short and focused. But Jason seemed to have other plans. "Have dinner with me," he said one evening as they finished reviewing the final timeline. "To go over the rehearsal dinner details." "We could do that now," Julia said, her heart hammering. "I have not eaten since breakfast, and I am guessing you have not either. There is a Thai place around the corner. We can work while we eat." It was not a date, Julia told herself as they walked through the warm evening air. It was just a working dinner. Professional. But it did not feel professional when Jason pulled out her chair, or when he recommended the pad see you because he remembered her mentioning that she loved peanut sauce, or when their hands brushed reaching for the water pitcher and he did not pull away immediately. "Can I ask you something personal?" Jason said, setting down his fork. "That depends on what it is." "Why did you become a wedding planner?" Julia smiled. "That is not very personal. The way you do it is. You care about every detail like it is your own wedding." She considered lying, giving him some professional answer about loving to bring people's visions to life. But something about the way he was looking at her made her want to be honest. "My parents split up when I was 16, she said. "They had this big, beautiful wedding. I used to watch the video constantly, and I kept thinking that if the day had been more perfect, if everything had gone exactly right, maybe they would have made it." "That is not how marriage works," Jason said gently. "I know that now. But I was a kid, and I needed to believe that love could be captured and preserved in perfect moments. So I built a career around creating those moments for other people. Even though you know they do not guarantee anything, even though. Because the moments still matter, even if they do not last forever." Jason was quiet for a long time. "What if you realize before the wedding that it is a mistake?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Julia's breath caught. "Jason, forget I said that." He signaled for the check, his walls slamming back into place. "It is late. I should get you a car. I can take the subway." "Not this late. Please let me." They did not talk about that night. Jason was distant at their next meeting, all business. But Julia could not stop thinking about his question, the look in his eyes when he had asked it. 2 weeks before the wedding, Melissa finally showed up to a meeting on time. She looked beautiful as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Julia's monthly rent. But there was something brittle about her smile. "I am so sorry I have been absent," she said, kissing Jason's cheek. He barely reacted. "I have been thinking a lot about the wedding, and I wanted to give you both some input." They spent 2 hours going through details, and Julia watched the dynamic between the couple carefully. Melissa was animated, enthusiastic even, but Jason was quiet. He agreed to everything she suggested without discussion, without the passionate opinions he usually had. After Melissa left for a spa appointment, Jason sat in silence for a long moment. "She is having an affair," he said finally. Julia's stomach dropped. "What?" "I have known for a month. His name is David. They met at her yoga studio." He laughed bitterly. "I am a billionaire with resources most people could not imagine, and I found out because she left her phone unlocked while taking a shower." "Jason, I am so sorry. The ridiculous thing is, I am not even that angry. Not at her anyway. I am angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for not ending this before we got to the point of making you order 300 custom invitations." Julia moved to the chair beside him, abandoning her professional distance. "Why have you not called it off?" "I kept thinking she would do it. that she would find the courage to tell me she did not want this anymore. I did not want to be the one to give up. He looked at her, and Julia saw the exhaustion in his eyes. But I have been giving up for a while now, have not I? It is not giving up to admit that something is not right. What is right then? How do you know? Julia thought about the past month, about early morning coffee runs and late-night working dinners, and the way her entire day felt brighter when she saw his name on her calendar. I think you feel it, she said quietly. When something is right, you do not have to convince yourself. Jason reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her with intention, and Julia felt the contact like electricity. Julia, he said, his voice rough. I need to tell you something. His phone rang, shattering the moment. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. I have to take this, he said, not letting go of Julia's hand. I will wait outside, Julia said, but he shook his head. Stay, please. He answered, and Julia watched his expression shift from resignation to shock. You are where? He asked. A pause. Melissa, the wedding is in 2 weeks. We have 300 guests. Another pause, longer this time. So that is it. You are just not coming back. Julia's heart raced as she pieced together the one-sided conversation. No, I understand. Actually, I think I have understood for a while. Jason's voice was surprisingly calm. I hope you are happy, Melissa. I genuinely mean that. When he hung up, he stared at his phone for a long moment before looking at Julia. She is in Paris with him. She said she could not pretend anymore, could not walk down an aisle knowing it was all wrong. He laughed, but it sounded almost relieved. She said I would thank her someday for being brave enough to end it. Are you okay? Julia asked, squeezing his hand. I think I am, he said, sounding surprised. Is that terrible? My fiancé just called off our wedding from another continent, and I think I am okay. It is not terrible. It is honest. They sat in silence for a while, still holding hands. Julia knew she should say something about canceling vendors, about damage control, about the logistical nightmare that was about to unfold. But all she could think about was the weight of his hand in hers, warm and solid and real. I need to tell you something, Jason said, echoing his earlier words. The reason I have been so difficult, so particular about every detail of this wedding, it was not about perfection. It was about stalling. Stalling. Every meeting gave me an excuse to see you. Every decision I questioned bought me more time in the same room with you. He turned to face her fully. I have been falling for you, Julia. Somewhere between the terrible orchids and the coffee runs and the working dinners, I fell completely in love with you. Julia felt tears prick her eyes. You were engaged. I know. And I hated myself for it. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I was projecting my doubts about Melissa onto you. But then you would walk in with your tablet and your smile and your complete refusal to be intimidated by me, and I would know it was real. Julia did not know how to finish that sentence. Every professional instinct screamed at her to walk away, to maintain boundaries, but her heart had other plans. You do not have to say anything, Jason said quickly. I know this is complicated. I just needed you to know before we cancel everything and go our separate ways. What if I do not want to go our separate ways? Julia said, her voice barely audible. Jason's eyes widened. What? I have been falling for you too, for weeks now. I kept telling myself it was impossible, that I was being an idiot, that you were a client and engaged and completely off limits. She laughed wetly. But apparently my heart did not get that memo. Jason stood, pulling her up with him. They were inches apart now, and Julia could see the gold flecks in his hazel eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I want to kiss you, he said, but I do not want you to think I am rebounding or being impulsive. What if I want to kiss you anyway? He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his gaze. I have wanted this for so long, he murmured, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking the moment. But then Julia's hands found his shirt, pulling him closer, and Jason's arms wrapped around her waist, and the kiss deepened into something that felt inevitable and right and absolutely perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jason rested his forehead against hers. "What now?" he asked. "Now we deal with the practical stuff," Julia said, trying to shift back into professional mode even though her heart was still racing. "We need to cancel the wedding. I will handle contacting the vendors, see what we can get refunded." Julia. "And we should draft a statement for the guests. Something brief and respectful that does not assign blame." Julia. "And the gifts will need to be returned, though honestly most people probably have not sent anything yet since we cut it so close with the invitations." Julia. Jason tilted her chin up until she met his eyes. "Breathe. We will handle all of that, but right now I just want to be here with you. Is that okay?" She nodded, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. They sat back down, but this time Jason pulled her chair closer, keeping her hand in his. "I should feel devastated right now," he said. "My wedding just imploded. My fiancé is in another country with another man, but all I can think about is how I get to do this." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "How I do not have to pretend anymore." "We should probably wait before telling people," Julia said. "About us, I mean. It will look bad if you jump straight into another relationship. I do not care what it looks like, but I care about your reputation, and mine. I do not want people thinking I broke up your engagement or that you are using me to get over Melissa." Jason considered this. "You are right. How long do we wait? I do not know. A few months, long enough that it does not seem suspicious." "Months?" Jason looked pained. "I just got to kiss you for the first time. You expect me to wait months before I can do it again in public?" Julia felt a smile tugging at her lips despite the seriousness of the situation. "We can still see each other, just discreetly." "I am not great at discreet. I tend to buy out entire restaurants when I want privacy." "Then I guess you will learn. Think of it as a challenge." Jason groaned but pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. "Fine, we will be discreet, but I am not waiting months to tell my family. My sister will know something is up immediately anyway." Over the next few days, Julia threw herself into damage control. She called every vendor personally, explaining the situation with as much tact as possible. Most were understanding, especially when Jason agreed to pay cancellation fees without argument. The venue was the hardest, but Julia managed to negotiate a partial refund by helping them book another event for the same date. Jason sent a brief email to the guest list, saying that he and Melissa had decided to part ways and the wedding would not be taking place. He kept it simple, classy, refusing to air any dirty laundry despite having every right to. Melissa called once, 2 days after her dramatic exit. Julia was at Jason's office when his phone rang, and she gestured that she would leave, but he shook his head. "Melissa," Jason said, putting the call on speaker. "I wanted to make sure you were okay," Melissa said. She sounded guilty, which was something. "I am fine. Julia has been helping me untangle everything." "Julia, the wedding planner, she is still there." Jason met Julia's eyes. She has been incredibly professional about the whole mess." "Right. Well, tell her thank you from me, I guess." There was an awkward pause. "Jason, I really am sorry. I should have ended things sooner. I should have been honest." "Yes, you should have," Jason agreed. "But I should have been honest too. I have known for a while that we were not right for each other. I just did not want to admit it." "You hate me?" "No. I am disappointed in how you handled it, but I do not hate you. I hope you are happy, Melissa. I really do." After she hung up, Julia studied Jason's face. You meant that, about hoping she is happy. I did. I wasted enough time being miserable with her. I do not want to waste any more being angry. He pulled Julia into his lap, something he did frequently now when they were alone in his office. I want to focus on the future, on figuring out what comes next. And what does come next? Well, I have been thinking about that. I need a vacation. Somewhere far away where no one knows me or cares about my failed engagement. That sounds nice. Come with me. Julia blinked. What? Come with me. 2 weeks in Italy. We can drink wine and eat pasta and pretend we are normal people who just met and fell in love. Jason, I have a business to run. I have other clients. You have one wedding next month and another in the fall. I checked your website. At her surprised look, he grinned. What? I am thorough. Your assistant can handle the preliminary meetings for the fall one, and you will be back in plenty of time for the August wedding. Julia wanted to say yes more than she had wanted anything in a long time. But doubt crept in, the practical part of her brain listing all the reasons it was too soon, too much, too risky. Hey, Jason said softly, reading her hesitation. If it is too fast, we can wait. I do not want to push you into something you are not ready for. It is not that. I want to go. I am just scared. Of what? Of this being too good to be true. Of getting to Italy and realizing we were just caught up in the drama of the situation. She took a breath. Of you waking up one day and realizing you made a mistake. Jason cupped her face, his expression serious. Julia, look at me. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. What I feel for you is not rebound or drama or a mistake. It is real, and it is not going away just because we fly to another country. How can you be so sure? Because I feel like myself with you. The version of me I forgot existed under all the pressure and expectations and business deals. You make me want to slow down, to actually enjoy my life instead of just surviving it. Julia kissed him, pouring all her fear and hope and love into it. When they broke apart, she was smiling. Okay, she said. Let's go to Italy. They left a week later, flying first class to Rome. Jason had wanted to take his private jet, but Julia convinced him to fly commercial to start their trip as normally as possible. He grumbled about legroom and crying babies, but she caught him smiling more than once during the flight, especially when she fell asleep on his shoulder somewhere over the Atlantic. They spent 3 days in Rome, wandering ancient streets and eating gelato and getting hopelessly lost in neighborhoods where no one spoke English. Jason was different away from his office, his phone mostly silent, his attention fully present. He held her hand constantly, kissed her in front of fountains and ruins and tiny cafes, looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. On their 4th day, they took a train to the Amalfi Coast. Jason had rented a villa overlooking the sea, private and beautiful, with terraces covered in bougainvillea and a view that stretched forever. This is too much, Julia said, standing on the balcony of the master bedroom. It is exactly enough, Jason said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Besides, I have been wanting to get you alone for days. She turned in his arms, seeing the heat in his eyes. They had been intimate since arriving in Italy, unable to keep their hands off each other, but there was something different in the air tonight, something that felt significant. I love you, Jason said, the words simple but weighted with meaning. I know it is fast, and I know we are still figuring things out, but I need you to know that I love you. Julia felt tears well up. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Do not be scared. We will figure this out together. They made love slowly that night, taking their time learning each other, trading whispered confessions and promises in the darkness. Afterward, Julia lay with her head on Jason's chest, listening to his heartbeat and feeling more content than she had in years. What are you thinking about? Jason asked, running his fingers through her hair. "How weird it is that I was planning your wedding to someone else a month ago. How different everything is now. Do you regret it? Taking me on as a client? Not even a little bit. Though I might adjust my screening process in the future. Add a question about whether the groom is secretly falling for the wedding planner." Jason laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "That seems wise, though I make no promises about not disrupting your future weddings out of jealousy." "You would not." "I absolutely would. I am very possessive of you, in case you have not noticed." Julia propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "I like it," she admitted. "The way you look at me like I am yours." "You are mine," Jason said, pulling her back down for a kiss. "And I am yours. Completely." They spent 2 weeks in paradise, splitting their time between the villa and day trips to nearby towns. They took a boat to Capri, hiked to hidden beaches, ate their weight in fresh seafood and homemade pasta. Jason taught Julia basic Italian phrases, laughing at her pronunciation. Julia taught Jason how to slow down, how to appreciate moments without thinking 3 steps ahead. On their last night, they had dinner at a tiny restaurant carved into the cliffside. The owner, a grandmother named Rosa, took one look at them and declared they were in love. She brought them champagne they had not ordered and insisted on cooking them a special meal off menu. "To love," Rosa said in heavily accented English, raising her own glass. "May yours last forever." "To love," Jason echoed, his eyes on Julia. "Forever sounds perfect to me." On the flight home, Julia felt the real world creeping back in. They had been in a bubble in Italy, but now they had to face reality. Jason's business, her work, the scrutiny that would come when people found out they were together. "Stop overthinking," Jason said, squeezing her hand. "How did you know I was overthinking? You get this little crease between your eyebrows. It is very cute, but it also means you are worrying about something." "I am just thinking about what happens next. We have been living in a fantasy for 2 weeks. Then we make it a reality. You move your stuff into my place. We go to work, have dinner together, fight about what to watch on TV. We have a regular life just together. You want me to move in with you, eventually, yes. Not immediately if you are not ready, but Julia, I am not interested in dating you casually. I want everything with you." Julia felt her heart expand. Okay, I will move in with you. Not immediately, but soon. I want everything with you too." Jason kissed her thoroughly, earning disapproving looks from the flight attendant until they broke apart, laughing. The next few months were an adjustment. Julia did move in, and they had to learn how to coexist in the same space. Jason worked insane hours, often taking calls at midnight with overseas partners. Julia had back-to-back weddings through the fall, coming home exhausted and covered in flower pollen. They fought occasionally, usually about small things like Jason leaving his gym clothes everywhere or Julia using all the hot water in the mornings, but they also laughed constantly. They cooked together, even though neither of them was particularly skilled. They explored the city on weekends, finding new restaurants and parks. Jason came to every wedding Julia planned, standing in the back and watching her work with obvious pride. Julia attended charity galas and business dinners with Jason, charming his colleagues and investors effortlessly. 6 months after Italy, Jason took her to meet his family. His parents lived in Connecticut in a house that was large but not ostentatious, warm in a way that surprised Julia. His mother, Patricia, hugged her immediately. "I have heard so much about you," Patricia said. "Jason has not stopped talking about you since the wedding that was not." "Mom," Jason groaned. His father, James, shook Julia's hand firmly. "It is good to see him happy. We were worried about the Melissa situation." "You never liked her," Jason said. "We loved her because you loved her," Patricia corrected. But we are much happier about Julia. Jason's sister, Jennifer, arrived late with her husband and 2 kids. She took one look at Jason and Julia together and pulled Julia aside the first chance she got. "Okay, I need all the details," Jennifer said, her eyes sparkling. "How did you steal my brother's heart while planning his wedding to someone else?" "I did not steal anything," Julia protested. "It just happened. Best things usually do. He is different with you, you know, lighter. Like he finally figured out what actually matters." That night, after dinner and board games and endless stories about Jason's childhood, they drove back to the city. Jason was quiet, his hand resting on Julia's knee as he drove. "They loved you," he said finally. "I loved them. Your family is wonderful. They are not what people expect. Everyone assumes billionaires must have terrible, cold families. But my parents are the most down-to-earth people I know. They kept me grounded. You are pretty grounded for a billionaire, most of the time. Only because of you." Julia laughed. "I had nothing to do with it. You have everything to do with it. Before you, I was turning into someone I did not recognize. All work, no joy. You reminded me what it feels like to actually live." A year after they met, Jason proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or on a grand vacation, but at home on a random Tuesday night. They were cooking dinner together, arguing good-naturedly about whether to add more garlic, when Jason suddenly got down on one knee right there in the kitchen. "What are you doing?" Julia asked, her heart leaping into her throat. "Something I have been planning for months but suddenly cannot wait another second to do." He pulled out a ring, simple and elegant, exactly what Julia would have chosen for herself. "Julia Carter, you came into my life at my worst moment and turned it into the best thing that ever happened to me. You are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. Will you marry me?" Julia dropped the spoon she was holding, not caring that it splattered sauce on the floor. "Yes," she said, pulling him up to kiss him. "Yes, absolutely yes." They decided to keep it simple. After the chaos of planning his almost wedding to Melissa, Jason wanted something intimate and personal. They got married 6 months later at the Metropolitan Gardens, the same venue that had been booked for the wedding that never happened. Only this time, it was just family and close friends, 50 people instead of 300. Julia wore a simple cream dress, holding a bouquet of roses and peonies. Jason cried when he saw her walking down the aisle, not bothering to hide his emotions. They wrote their own vows, promising to choose each other every day, to build a life based on honesty and love and really good coffee. "I was planning the wrong wedding," Jason said during his vows, his voice thick with emotion. "Until I found the right person. You showed me what love actually looks like, Julia, patient and kind and brave enough to be real. I promise to spend the rest of my life deserving you." Julia could barely see him through her tears. "You came into my life as the most difficult client I ever had," she said, laughing wetly. "But you became the easiest person to love. You challenge me, support me, make me laugh even when I want to be mad at you. I promise to plan the rest of our life together with the same care I put into this day, making every moment count." When they kissed as husband and wife, their small group of guests erupted in cheers. Julia felt Jason's hand firm on her waist, his smile against her lips, and thought about how strange life could be. How the worst professional situation of her career had led to the greatest love of her life. The reception was perfect. Rosa, the Italian grandmother from their trip, had flown in to cater, insisting it was her gift to them. Patricia cried through half the evening, clutching James's hand. Jennifer gave a toast that was equal parts embarrassing childhood stories and genuine emotion. "To my little brother," she said, raising her glass. who finally figured out that the best things in life are not the ones you plan for, but the ones that surprise you when you are looking the other way. And to Julia, who had the patience to plan a wedding for the world's most difficult groom, then the wisdom to marry him anyway. During their first dance, Jason pulled Julia close, swaying to music that felt like it was playing just for them. "Happy," he murmured against her hair, deliriously. "You, more than I thought possible, though I do feel a little bad." "About what?" "You spent a year planning a wedding that never happened, then you had to plan your own wedding on top of all your regular work. I should have hired you a planner." Julia laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "I did not mind. This one I got to keep." 2 years into their marriage, Julia got pregnant. It was not planned, but they were both thrilled. Jason became obsessively protective, reading every pregnancy book he could find and trying to baby-proof their penthouse apartment when Julia was only 3 months along. "You do realize the baby will not be mobile for months, right?" Julia asked, watching him install cabinet locks. "I am being proactive. You are being neurotic. Can I be both?" Their daughter, Jane, was born on a snowy January morning, tiny and perfect with Jason's hazel eyes and Julia's nose. Jason cried again, holding his daughter with a tenderness that made Julia fall in love with him all over again. "She is perfect," he whispered, sitting next to Julia's hospital bed. "You are perfect. Thank you for this." "Thank you for being the difficult groom who drove me crazy," Julia said, exhausted but happy. "Best decision I ever made." Jane was 6 months old when Julia decided to scale back her wedding planning business. She still took on select clients, but she wanted more time with her family. Jason had also started working fewer hours, delegating more to his executive team so he could be home for dinner and bedtime routines. They bought a house in the suburbs with a yard and good schools, keeping the penthouse for when they wanted to stay in the city. Jason taught Jane to swim in their pool, patient and encouraging. Julia started a blog about weddings and marriage, sharing what she had learned about planning the perfect day versus building a perfect life. On their 5th anniversary, they went back to Italy, leaving Jane with Patricia and James. The villa on the Amalfi Coast was available, and they spent a week reliving their first trip together. "Remember when you said you were scared this was too good to be true?" Jason asked, holding Julia as they watched the sunset from their terrace. "I remember. Are you still scared?" Julia turned to face him, seeing the man she had fallen in love with, weathered by 5 years but somehow even more attractive. Lines around his eyes from laughter, silver threading through his dark hair, hands that had held their daughter minutes after she was born. "Not even a little bit," she said. "This is real. We are real." "Forever," Jason said, kissing her softly. "Forever," Julia agreed. 3 years later they had a son, Marcus, who was somehow even more energetic than his sister. Their house was chaos, filled with toys and laughter and the occasional tantrum. Jason's company continued to grow, but he never let it consume him the way it had before Julia. They had family dinners every night, took vacations together, made their marriage and their children the priority. Julia sometimes thought about the wedding that never happened, about how devastated she had been at the time. All that work, all those plans, ending in disaster. But it had not been disaster at all. It had been a beginning, the universe clearing the path for something better. She told Jason this one night after they had finally gotten both kids to sleep. They were collapsed on the couch, exhausted but content. "I have been thinking about that time a lot lately," she said. "How angry I was when Melissa called from Paris. How worried I was about your reputation and mine. How scared I was that what we felt was just drama and adrenaline. And now I am grateful for all of it, for Melissa being brave enough to leave, for you being honest about your feelings, for us being crazy enough to risk everything for a chance at this." Jason pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "I am grateful, too, for taking on a difficult billionaire as a client, for staying when his bride left, for choosing me every day since." "Easiest choice I ever made," Julia said, tilting her face up for a kiss. "Liar. I am still difficult." "True. But you are my difficult billionaire. I would not change a thing." Years passed in a beautiful blur. Jane started school, excelling at everything she tried. Marcus followed in his father's footsteps, already showing signs of the same driven intensity. Jason and Julia grew into their roles as parents, as partners, as best friends who happened to be married. They renewed their vows on their 10th anniversary, a small ceremony in their backyard with their children as witnesses. Jason's vows made everyone cry again, talking about how Julia had saved him from a life he did not want and built a future he could not have imagined. Julia's vows were simpler, but no less meaningful. "You were the difficult groom who changed everything. Thank you for being impossible. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life." On their 20th anniversary, with grown children and a lifetime of memories behind them, they went back one more time to the Amalfi Coast. The villa was still there, though Rosa had passed and new owners ran the restaurant. They stood on the terrace where they had first said "I love you," older now but still completely in love. "You remember what you said to me that first night here?" Jason asked, holding Julia's hand. "I said a lot of things that night. You said you loved me so much it scared you sometimes." "I remember." "Does it still scare you?" Julia looked at her husband, at the man who had been her most difficult client and her greatest love. She thought about the wedding that never was, about Melissa leaving and Jason staying and her own heart being brave enough to risk everything. She thought about vows and babies and chaos and joy and 20 years of choosing each other every single day. "No," she said, smiling. "It does not scare me at all anymore. It just makes me happy." Jason kissed her as the sun set over the Mediterranean, and Julia thought about perfect moments and lasting love, and how sometimes the best stories begin with disaster. She had spent her career creating perfect wedding days for other people, believing in the magic of that one moment. But what she had learned, what Jason had taught her, was that the magic was not in the day. It was in every day after, in the choice to stay, to love, to build something real. They had started with a wedding that never happened and built a marriage that would last forever. And that, Julia thought as she kissed her husband under the Italian sunset, was the most perfect ending she could have ever planned.